Welcome to the Vibrant Couple. Today I have invited Ted Riter, Guide into Oneness. So Ted, welcome. What does it mean, Guide into Oneness?
Thank you, Valdo, for inviting me here today. The guide into oneness is my belief that we're all searching for oneness. And oneness plays out many different ways. Often we think of in a relationship and intimacy, becoming one with our partner,
Which is
right?
wonderful.
Which is wonderful. And so many people grow up believing that we have a soulmate and I'll find that person and we'll just be one person. In my first marriage, I would often say, my wife would often say that we are the other side of each other's heartbeat, which is beautiful. We've become one in that. There's also a oneness that some people desire for themselves. Like, I want to feel at one with myself. I want to feel whole and complete and not scattered. And I want to really know myself. So there's that oneness
Yeah.
also. There's also a oneness that some people feel with source, something greater than me and you. And they go through meditation, all different ways of finding that kind of oneness. So I think there's just this natural inclination that we want to become one. We want to become solely wrapped up in the other one, which is
And
beautiful, which is
yeah,
fairy tale beautiful. And it doesn't work. Well, it does work. I should back up. It's not that it doesn't work, but there's some place of finding that oneness with other, specifically, where we've become so one with them that we no longer know where we end and they begin. And so let's put a pin in that for a moment.
no, I
Because
totally get it.
I think to find oneness with yourself, I don't think there's a downside. I think that's really beautiful to really become complete and whole like that. There's something really beautiful about that. But when we get to that place with another, with a lover, with a friend, when we become so, what we say, enmeshed
Yeah.
with that person that I don't know where I end and you begin, there's a beauty, but there's also a loss of the individual. And so often what I see in relationship is we've become so close that they're like me, I'm like them, and we've lost our passion. And so they start searching. And so I like to say I'm a guide in this space, but perhaps it should be a guide concerning oneness, a guide around oneness, because sometimes it's guiding someone into this, and sometimes it's gently helping them differentiate
Yeah.
so that they can go from this couple oneness to, in some ways, find their own oneness, which is a little bit differentiated from their partner, or sometimes a lot differentiated from their partner.
So what I'm hearing is there are people who are too enmeshed, people who are too far away from each other, and you help somehow find the dance between the two and close enough so that they are still connected. And some people you help them get them there. Some people you help them basically get out of that enmeshment.
Exactly, exactly. And as you said, it's a dance. It's a little bit in, it's a little bit out. And for me, I see that coming as a natural response to living in the world. So if we can kind of go back
Yep.
in time, we can go back to the womb. And not everyone has this experience. For some it's, I can imagine, pretty traumatic, how they were conceived and just being carried in their biological mother's womb. But for hopefully many of us, we have this experience of oneness. Right? Everything we need is provided for us. Right? It's warm and cozy in there. We get our nutrients. everything happens within that womb. It's beautiful in that sense of oneness. And so our first differentiation in life for most of us is this birthing into the world. And I think we always have this yearning to have that feeling again. We may not classify as like, I want to be back in the womb, right? But this yearning to be back in this place of everything is perfect and whole and complete right here.
Of union, yeah.
Yeah. And so as adults, or as even teens, right, we're often wanting to find that in relationship.
So we have a very strong imprint of that. We also have a strong imprint of the Hollywood Disney culture of, eternal
Right.
beginning of a relationship. We also have blueprints that it is natural that passion fades over time in couples. And so, how do you help the couples you work with all these blueprints to find and create that balance in which they can still access that wonderful, juicy union with one's partner and that place in which they are both independent, separate, they have their own life, and then they have that dance with each other. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, so people come to me in all different stages, right? Sometimes they have that electricity that's going on and they're wanting to become closer. Very often, especially with couples that have been together for a while, they're so close and they're trying to figure out, like, what does it mean to be a little bit differentiated? So everyone walks in differently. Everyone walks in with their own childhood stories and the stories of this is my last relationship and then one before that. And so it's really unique for each person. But if we're coming from the distance, right, how do we start to let go of our old stories? How do we start to let go of our defenses so that I can let this person into my life? And so a lot of that is good old fashioned conscious conversation and learning how to be brave in exposing my inner parts. And so sometimes we have to work through shame. Sometimes we have to work through the fears of safety. And they're all different beautiful ways of having conversations. And there's plenty of examples. There's nonviolent communication or T groups, imago dialogue, many different modalities on how we connect, how we really see each other. But for me, one of the biggest learnings over the last 10 years, at least, is that there is a communication that can help us find breakthroughs. But there's two other things that also really are important. And one is retraining our nervous system so that we can hear each other. Retrain our nervous system so that we can share what's most vulnerable for us. And so a lot of my work is around that, learning to breathe into the world, to create safety within me, and a welcoming within me, so that I can be in dialogue with you, with my partner.
So it's very interesting. The masculine in me right now feels uncomfortable because I would love to have the big picture of the third one before we dive into the second. And so what is that? What is the third one?
If you need a communication breakthrough, you need to break the patterns that have you stopping. So I'm going to do something to make a difference here. Yeah. We let go of our shields that both prevent us sometimes from speaking and prevent us sometimes from listening. And so try to create that sense of any conversation is possible.
Got it. So breaking the third is breaking the pattern.
It's a tool, just as breath work can be a tool, just as movement can be a tool, just as meditation can be a tool, just as one thing I do quite a bit with my wife is we do a praise practice. So we praise each other.
Yeah.
And so it's any of these things can be tools that break us out of our habitual patterns.
Sometimes it takes that much to change, 20 years of, getting numb with each other,
Right.
doing the same thing comfortably and believing we know each other when we actually live with each other's, with the projections we have with our partners. So disruption, and I love that that praise practice because it is so different than the way our mind works. That is always negative, judging and comparing
Right.
and
Right.
and putting down.
So we need some kind of pattern interrupt.
Yeah.
And as I said, sometimes it is what are the things we need to convey, share, receive so that we can know each other better. And then sometimes you asked before, how do we, come together or pull apart? It is, for one, becoming comfortable with boundaries. We often think of boundaries as a negative.
Oh, it's really important. Yeah.
It's really beautiful, actually.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Because once I have a boundary and I understand your boundary, I know how much room I have to move. Right? When I don't know what your boundary is, I start tiptoeing around. So I don't give all of myself. I hold back some of myself, or I blow past it and I upset you. And so once we know boundaries, then that becomes now we're a little bit differentiated. Still know and love and just really be connected. But now we have a little differentiation. And when we start to have that differentiation, then we have a spark. And so sometimes we call this sexual polarity.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
That
I was about to ask.
spark,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That arcs between 2 points. And so we start to create that sexual polarity. And part of it can be done with boundaries. As you know, part of it can be done with embodied practices, with the I call the yoga of relationships, how we move energy back and forth, how we do it with breath, how movement informs our connection with each other and even our differentiation
Yeah.
from each other. So for some, it's how do we bring them together, and for some, it's not how do we blow them apart, right? But how do we pull them apart just enough to have that spark again? And that's often what I see as the biggest challenge for people who've been in relationship for years.
So please give us some insight on how you do that, on bringing that spark back.
I'll tell you the first challenge is that many couples I see, they're not sure they want to bring the spark back.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I see that a lot too.
And I mean, they showed up, right? They came to my door. Usually one of them wants to bring the spark back. It's the other one who doesn't. Because I guess if they both want to bring the spark back, boom, they'll jump in. If they neither want to bring the spark back, they'll just continue to live the life they're living, whether that's together or apart. But often there's one who wants it. They want to feel more alive in this relationship. They remember what it was like a couple years ago or a couple decades ago, and they want to have that's the feeling I want again. I want to feel alive. I want to feel seen. I want to feel like one woman said, I feel like a piece of furniture with him, like just a piece of furniture. I want to feel more than a piece of furniture. I want to feel like I'm your partner. We're doing this life in a fabulous way. So that stage often takes that first part of a comfort in being able to tell you my truth, and being able to hear your truth. For a couple to hear, oh, she's dying over here. She feels malnourished for your attention. Can you see that? Can you see it without judgment?
So basically, honest, relearning honest expression of what is really going on versus continuing to shove things under the rug to
Yes.
somehow keep the peace, keep the comfort, keep this, keep that.
Yeah. Sometimes it's blowing things up. Right? We need to blow things up so that we can create something. And blowing up doesn't have to be catastrophic. Doesn't have to be some kind of scandal. It can just be interrupting what we're doing. What's possible often is shrouded in all the stories that I'm carrying. And once I let those go, I can see, wow, she really does want all of me. He really does want all of me. And from there, like, oh, if that's the case, here's what we can create. And so once we get through that, this understanding of like, oh, there is something bigger that we're able to create out there, then it's really a matter of learning how to move energy back and forth. So how can I light you up when we're breathing belly to belly? So a lot of this work comes through Tantra and through other lineages of moving energy back and forth. But ideally, it's not just how can I feel you when you're belly to belly? How can I charge you and feel your charge when we're touching? But how can I do it when you're across the room?
Yeah.
And how can I do it when you're not even in the house? I can feel you. You're at work. You're at the park. You're wherever you are. Can I feel you from here? Can I find that spark inside of me that lights up about you? And can I give it a little bit of air to bring that flame up?
So you relearn one way or the other to have that deep connection with each other, and you practice it.
You practice it.
Practice it.
And you practice it.
Yep.
When I started dating the woman who became my wife, I was just starting to work with John Wineland. And as I started dating her, it made it very clear that I was interested in creating this relationship as practice. Not practice for the real thing later on, but practice, like, let's get this stuff into our system. And so it was a very intentional way to start a relationship.
Was that something that you brought one-sidedly, or was she already with that worldview that everything we do is practicing to be better, and as one person and as a couple?
Yeah, I brought that to her. She was a huge yes to it, but it really wasn't something that she was in her worldview. It was something that I was interested in doing.
How long did that take you to somehow bring her along? Because
It took very, very little time. One of our first dates was to go see David Data do it was just a couple hours he was doing for the public. And I thought, oh, if she can hang with that, then I think we're in the right place. So she was, certainly very open to that. It just hadn't been presented to her, as most of the stuff isn't presented to most of us, right? We have to go looking for it. And so she was certainly a big yes, but I said, hey, let's take on life this way. Let's take on life as very conscious, as very intentional. And one of the things we've always known is that relationships take intention and attention.
Yeah.
And we've done, I think, a beautiful job of doing both.
I have the impression that the third point, the disruption, the intentional creating disruption, is as a service to the other 2 points of knowing oneself and learning and practicing that dance as a couple of fusion and separation and the attraction, the polarity.
In
Is that
service
correct?
is Yeah, in service is a great way to categorize it. We don't want, I don't think we want a life of disruption. Right? We want a life of connection. But the disruption sometimes is necessary to break those patterns so
Yeah.
that we can figure out how to both connect and to differentiate. Right? Sometimes we get stuck in those patterns where we can't tell ourselves apart. And so we need something to disrupt that. Ideally, it's disrupting in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Some of us choose to disrupt in a really unhealthy, toxic, ripple creating way. But if we can differentiate, if we can disrupt in a way that's actually generative, that's building, that's healing, then that's going to be in service. And sometimes it's this way, and sometimes it's this way. Like
So
what's the thing we need to disrupt so that we can actually come together?
So this is where you come in as a guide to oneness, in which they're going to make mistakes and you are there to somehow help them not fall down too much and then learn from their mistakes and then also practice the good ways.
Absolutely. And I've made most of the mistakes, and uh, not only have I made most of the mistakes myself and learned from them, but I've been doing this in one way or another for 30 years and guiding people into and through relationships. And so there's not much I haven't seen. And I'm always pleasantly surprised when there's something new, but there are certainly paths to both the connection and the differentiation that can be really super helpful. And as it turns out, and I think sometimes people forget this, it's not just helpful for the couple, but if they have kids, it's actually good to model a healthy relationship for their kids. Sometimes people they stick into their patterns and they think it's for the sake of their kids or maybe for their bigger community, whatever it might be. But there's actually a really important and powerful learning lesson when you recognize that everything you do is a model
Yeah.
for especially kids in your own house.
Yeah, because it's a blueprint for others.
It is.
They also basically follow your trend. If you're a good, couple, they want to be like you. If you're a bad couple, they don't want to be like you.
Yeah, yeah, and they, certainly kids, like, they don't need the details. They don't need to see everything that's happening, but they will pick up on, where are my parents now? Like where in
Yeah.
relationship are my
Yeah.
parents? And I think it's really important. And one of the things that my wife and I, as two adults who brought kids into the relationship already, that we've been very aware of, like, we're modeling this stuff for our kids who are now teens and just now out of teens. So it's been important for us to uh, to not share details, but to also not hide.
Yeah, and because that aliveness is something they are searching in their life, they want more,
Yes.
and how to create it.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
if they have a positive model, that's much easier.
I do admit that sometimes my daughter rolls her eyes when she sees the name of the podcast I'm listening to or the book I'm reading. She's like, oh.
But that's different. Yeah.
That's different. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you were to give one or maybe two pieces of advice from the wisdom that you have accumulated over the years to our viewers, one of the ways to somehow bypass, I know it's not bypassable, but somehow one way to help them go through through suffering quicker, to help find the dance quicker that, I'm pretty sure that any viewers that has watched us as long as up to now, is really wanting to have more of.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the two words I said earlier are the most important. That it takes intention and attention. And I think that for many couples, they focus on the crisis du jour, right? Whatever, like we need to get the kids to school, or this is happening at work, or this is going on in my health, and relationship gets pushed aside, so it loses some of the attention. Because I can count on this person for being here while I handle all this other stuff that's going on. And that's absolutely true. And there's a downside to that, right? When we, yes, hopefully the relationship is, strong and therefore I can focus on this. But if we start losing attention over here, we forget to feed the plant in this relationship, it will wither and die. And then you'll look at each other after 20 years and say, who are you? Do you see me? So it takes attention. And then the intention part is, once we're aware that, it takes some attention, then what are the practices that we're putting in? What are the experiments that we're doing within the relationship to keep it alive, to disrupt the old patterns? And that might mean something as simple as date night. But as we've been speaking about earlier, there's also this place for conversation to get past the news of the day, or how are your parents, and how's everyone doing, fill me on work kind of thing. Instead, I want to know, can I break through that pattern of the surface stuff to talk about my heart? And sometimes if we're not giving the relationship enough attention, we get to this place of intention, like, I want to show you my heart, but actually I don't know you anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't
it's
think
not safe.
Or it's not safe. I think you're going to make me wrong, or you're just not going to hear. I'm going to pour something out, and you're going to hear, oh, that's nice, dear. Try it like that. Probably not that, but I want to know that I can trust you with my heart, and I can only trust you with my heart if we've given this relationship attention.
I fully agree. And so I want to bring, I love to play with words. And so I want to bring something to you. A lot of the couples I work with, and it seems that you do too, I also bring tension. I somehow intentionally create tension. How does it fit in your model?
Oh, I like that a lot. By training, I'm a rabbi. And one of the things I was taught very early on was, and I think originally they taught it as like a Protestant minister had said this, that the job of the minister, in my case, a rabbi, or in my case now as a coach or a mentor, is to comfort the distressed and to distress the comfort.
Perfect.
So I still see that as part of what I do, and not to intentionally drop a bomb in here, but my role often with couples is to translate and to stop and say, hey, did you hear what he just said? Rather than kind of glossing through it. He says something, but I've been with him so long, my conditioned response is here. And sometimes my job to create tension, I love that, is to stop them. To be that third ear listening, to say, hey, this thing you're answering is not connected to what he was actually saying. And so it's to create tension in that sense, to make sure that they're actually listening. And to dig a little more, because sometimes they will dig, but then they'll pull back because they've got a lot to lose, right? They've got a relationship on the line. I don't have that relationship. I'm a coaching relationship. I'm a mentor relationship, but not a love relationship, not a family relationship. So I can take some risks and have people try things on for size. We were talking a little earlier, I started a YouTube channel recently that's the modern intimacy experiment.
Modern intimacy experiment. I love that. And so I'll link one of your videos at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason I call it an experiment is sometimes the way I create tension is giving people a practice as an experiment.
Yeah.
So for the next week, you're going to, I mean, it seems simple to me and probably to you as well, you're going to eye gaze for 5 minutes a day. For some people, that's way too intimate. But just as an experiment, you don't have to eye gaze for 5 minutes every day for the rest of your life. Just try it for a week. See how it goes. See what it opens up. You're going to praise each other for 5 minutes a day for another week. You're going to, you are going to create a date night where you plan everything as an experiment. And so one is, it does a couple things. One is it creates an understanding that, okay, this is going to end. Right? Experiment has a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
And we'll get to evaluate. Maybe we'll do it again. Maybe we won't. But also what it does when I frame things that way is that it puts a little playfulness in it. Like, I can't believe we're doing this, but Ted said, we got to try this as an experiment, so let's try it. So it puts a little playfulness in it, and it takes out some of the seriousness.
Yeah.
Because often we get bogged down in just the seriousness of relationship. And I think there's a place for play that people often forget. And so, tonight is costume night. Ted said we have to do it. It's Wednesday night. It's costume night. And so let's do this as an experiment. And I'll go back to that word tension again. It creates that tension.
Yeah.
Right? That busts them out of their own patterns in life. And because they're doing this experiment, it takes off some of the pressure. They can just play with it. They can be goofy and still have this beautiful experience that they may or may not replicate. Maybe just once. That's enough.
So from these experiments, and I work the very same way with my clients, you basically loosen patterns that are somehow fused, like a WD-40 spray, to help basically them become more playful, more attentive, and more willing to risk and
more attuned.
Exactly.
More attuned also. Yeah, because these patterns numb us. They numb us, our souls, but they numb our connection.
Yeah, and then when things accumulate over time, we lash out with each other. In a way, our partner cannot hear us.
Exactly.
And so learning to basically speak up or act out in a way that is, hearable is really critical.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Cool. Well, Ted, that was a wonderful conversation. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And please keep up the good work. If this conversation with Ted inspired you to liberate more love, please hit the like button below and subscribe so you can be notified when I publish new juicy content. And please share with all you believe would benefit. Of course, do that with intention and attention. I look forward to seeing you very soon.